Can I ask a question, Jeremiah? So for those who are obviously not really trading, like how do you see Bitcoin in kind of like an asset allocation more for the longer term? And how should like people that are thinking of going into Bitcoin, obviously now we are almost at 100,000, but how do you see it in more like of an asset allocation versus a speculative asset?
Yeah, so I think there's some really great ways in terms of a portfolio allocation standpoint to think about that, and then also how to act on that in terms of other assets in a portfolio. So when I think about, let's say, just from an allocation perspective, so you're saying, I don't really know about the story of Bitcoin, but I'd like to have an allocation. You're probably having some type of stock exposure, and that's going to be your main exposure, and you're going to have bonds. And then in addition to that, you're maybe thinking, okay, I'm going to have some maybe gold, silver, and Bitcoin. And that's a great way to think about it, because you have these different proxies that are liquidity release valves, right? That are functioning as assets that provide positive returns during certain periods of time, especially on the upside. I think about, from an allocation perspective, holding Bitcoin and gold, either equal weighted or roughly around the same weighting, is a great way to think about it, because you have two assets that perform in a positive way to liquidity, and sometimes they're uncorrelated depending on where we are in the macro regime. So I like to think about it from an allocation perspective. You're saying, okay, I'm planning to hold something for the next decade. How do I think about this? I think Bitcoin on a 4, 5, 10-year time horizon held with gold. And then, if you have, it kind of depends on how you're doing it. If you're, if you're earlier on and you're adding exposure with your, income that's still pushing into your different, then, you're kind of adjusting those weightings depending on, where you're putting your dollars and things like that. But I think about it as it's a great thing to hold in connection with gold. And so I like to think about it like that from an allocation perspective, and as opposed to like going full degen and putting 100% of your money. So that's how I think about it from an allocation perspective.